as you probably know, during the same time frame, Japanese Americans were relocated. And there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that said that there was nothing wrong with that as well. And it took congressional action to give them a form of compensation. So simply because the courts may say that there's nothing wrong with it, it doesn't necessarily then say that the injustice that was committed is somehow right. But that's why I would like to have that information from you. It seems to be, from listening to your testimony, Ms. Dorner, that what you are saying is that because of the two cases and because of the GAO report, the services are not going to look any further, that that is your authority and that is what you're relying on. Am I hearing you correctly?
No, ma'am. We said that if there was additional information that would come forth, that we would have that conversation, that discussion, and that review. We have done legal reviews in the past. When we met with the fund in the past, they said they did have additional information. We asked and was provided information, and we've done legal reviews. We would, as we go forward, continue to do that type of analysis and discussion.
Is there anything in writing of the results of these legal reviews that you've done?
We do have some of that information, yes.
Can you also provide us with that? Yes, because what I don't want to see is another generation go by and you're still in review. We'd like to have some kind of a understanding of what exactly the service's position is. So yes. I'd appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly, you are the project coordinator for the Harris Neck Land Trust, and you've been that for 6 years, or the movement has been in place for 6 years?
Yes, the movement started in December of 05.
December of 05?
And the trust was formed in 06.
In 2006?
Yes, the trust was actually formed. The movement began a few months before the trust was formed.
In listening to the testimony of the descendants, I would like to understand, and your testimony, there seems to be somewhat of a discrepancy as to the word compensation. Is the compensation that you're seeking a monetary compensation, or is it the return of the lands?
The compensation we're seeking and the community has been for a long time is the land, and that it's not financial. And the whole issue of compensation, again, revolves around the word just.
No,
it's not just.
I don't take any exception to that. I'm just trying to understand what it is. So the lands, I assume that in the information that Ms. Donor would provide to us, we would have some kind of a list of the members of your land trust and the portions of the land which they are claiming. Would that be correct?
Yes. And we developed a community plan with the help of a scientific, cultural, and natural resources consulting firm and many others. We spent 2 years on it. We invited the public. We considered every possible aspect, and our plan sets aside more than half of the total acres in permanent conservation, where the only thing that could be done is organic farming. And the rest of the acreage is going to be protected in similar fashion. We're going to protect all the ponds, especially Woody Pond. We're putting a huge buffer zone around Woody Pond, which is already densely wooded. And the buffer zone we're going to have is twice what all the ornithological studies call for. So we're going to protect what's there, and it's with the development of the community is going to be environmentally sensitive to the nth degree.
Do you have your plan in writing?
Yes, it's been submitted to the committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Now recognize Ms. Hanabusa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Something along those lines. Mr. Kelly, you seem to be very familiar with the plan. You're talking about maintaining, in your prior testimony, you're talking about maintaining it with different kinds of I guess, particular parts of the refuge that you're talking to. Are you using conservation easements, or are you, I guess, ready to consider conservation easements in that process?
Yes, long ago we settled that issue. So more than half the acreage, total acreage, is going to be put into permanent conservation. We don't know what trust will manage that. That's a small detail, but that's going to be put into permanent conservation, and then the rest of it is going to be managed, and we're willing to work, again, as I said, in the future with Fish and Wildlife on the management of that.
You know, the problem with situations like this, and you know, being from Hawaii, we have the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, for example. We've had things that has happened over the time. The problem is you can never really turn back the clock all the way. You can't undo, irrespective of the injustice. It's just a difficult thing to do. So the question that I have is, you have formed a Harris Trust. So is it anticipated that that trust will continue to manage, assuming a settlement is reached, into the future? Because the concern would be that you can't do all of these things if there isn't some kind of an organization that oversees everything. Because once you get to the returning of a particular parcel to a particular person, then their rights to alienate the lands come into question as well. So how did you envision, or how did the plan envision anticipating those kinds of situations?
Yes, and again, it's the Harris Neck Land Trust, and the request is that the land be returned to that trust, which will manage and protect the lands in perpetuity. And then under that umbrella, if you will, there will be strict covenants put in for resale, for example, 10-year moratorium on no resale whatsoever. The property has to go under that umbrella to the original families, and I'd like to remind everyone that those are not just the black families, but there are white landowners involved, some of whom are a part of this movement. We've approached them all. E.M. Thorpe's granddaughter, he was the largest landowner. She's part of the movement.
Now, I will also like to point out to you that, for example, with the Native Hawaiians, and in 1921 was when the law passed. It's the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920. One of that is that it prevents the alienation of lands. You have 99-year leases to a family, but they cannot ever alienate the land. In other words, it comes back to the commission, to basically a form of a trust. And that's the idea, that those lands will always be there for Native Hawaiians. And these are defined as people with 50% plus blood quantum. But you seem to be indicating that there is an anticipation that people would be able to sell. Now, would that be a sale back to the trust first?
Yes.
Or a sale to anyone who wants to?
Back to the trust, and the trust has to approve all future sales. So, for example, you know, this cannot go up to the highest bidder. There's not going to be the Hyatt Hotel. And just to remind the committee, the two premier cultures in America regarding stewardship are the Native American cultures, you know, the 500 nations that were here, and the Gullah. And these two, this blood is in this community, and that is the guiding ethic within the trust.
I hear you very clearly, and I anticipate you will provide that all in the plan, and that, so this is, the anticipation is that this will be held in trust in perpetuity for the benefit of all who were the original people there, the descendants of the original people that were there.
Yes, and we're going to, this is another rumor that's been spread, we're going to close down the community. That could not be farther from the truth. The experience the public will receive in the future will be greatly enhanced. I spend hundreds of hours in Harris Neck. I have never talked to a single birder, and I am one of those, who knows anything about the history. So, for example, one of the other objections that Fish and Wildlife has raised, and I'm speaking word for word, we cannot return this land to you because Harris Neck is wall-to-wall archaeological cultural sites. You know how many there are? 6. 4 of those are in the wetlands. So we have hired the premier archaeological consulting firm in Georgia to do the first ever comprehensive acre-by-acre site analysis, and every piece piece of pottery, et cetera, that we find, we are going to protect, preserve, sign, and turn into an educational component. So the public's experience of Harris Neck will be greatly enhanced.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Our time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Hanabusa.
Mr. Kelly, something that I've been curious about when you gave me the two dates on when basically the Harris Neck Land Trust was created, 2005, 2006. Now, why such a long period of time? Why 2005, 2006 before the trust is actually created?
There was a strong movement starting in the mid to late 1970s. The reason that nothing happened after the war is you're talking about a different culture in Reverend Thorpe's generation. The acceptance, the patriotism, the lack of formal education. So when Wilson and Reverend Timmons and Chester Dunham's generation came up, that's when the first movement started. And it was basically a legal avenue that was approached. However, there was a bill that they tried to get at the time through Representative Bo Ginn. And there was, the effort then died in the very early 80s, even though the 60 Minutes piece on Harris Neck came out in 83. So for, you know, if the committee puts itself in a similar position, it's about people getting their putting a lot of effort, blood, sweat, and tears into a movement after their land was taken already from their parents, and having the result that occurred in 1979 and then 1980. And then fortunately or unfortunately, I heard the story on National Public Radio when I was working in California in 2007, and that's when my involvement started. And Reverend Timmons, Wilson Moran, and myself had a meeting that led to many more meetings that led to the formation of trust. So it's I guess it's an answer of a couple of evolutions through the time.
I thought you said the trust was formed in 2005, 2006.
The trust was formed in 06. The movement actually began in 05, but the legal trust was formed in 06.
But you said you heard about it in 2007?
Yes, I'm a slow learner. I heard about it in 2007 and came to Harris Neck to hang out with Wilson, and I ended up going back to California and giving my notice at work and moved there. I got involved in the community, and one thing led to another, but I'm a slow learner.
So I guess the question is, what caused the movement before you got there then? If somebody want to answer that. I mean, you have this gap from 1980 to 2005, 2006. So what happened that triggered 2005, 2006? Anyone?
Well, I think we need to go back to 79, Vietnam. We just got out from Vietnam, and a lot of the men came home, and they saw that we were living on the side of Harris Neck Road on 1 acre of land per family, and they wanted to go and try to get this 2,687 acres of land. And Reverend Timmons put it like this. He said, well, we fought for freedom for the Vietnamese, we need to fight for freedom for us. And that's how it started.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
I yield to Ms. Hanabusa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, first I'd like to request unanimous consent to enter into the record several statements in support of H.R. 1171, the Marine Debris Act Reauthorization Amendment of 2011.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much. My question for Dr. Bamford is this. In hearing your testimony, you seem to say that the marine debris was basically like two major categories. One is the abandoned fish gear and traps, and the second, of course, seems to be the natural disasters that we did not anticipate. Am I hearing you correctly?
Probably the two base would be the fishing gear, which we call the ocean-based sources, and then you have the land-based sources, which is the bottles and caps and things you see coming. I think the new category is the result of these storms, and this is something that the intensity, and we just didn't observe before, but now the program is really paying attention to this and trying to find ways to make the communities more resilient.
And as you can imagine, I represent Hawaii, so the storm issue, we have all the other issues, but the storm issue is something that we're kind of wondering how we're going to deal with. Is it anticipated that because the storm or the natural disaster that we're, of course, really concentrating on is the tsunami and earthquake that happened in Japan, and we have heard reports that it's making its way across the Pacific. Some is that it's going to bypass us and it's going to hit the West Coast. Some is that it's going to hit the West Coast and come back and hit us. And some is that it's going to hit us. So can you tell me what NOAA is doing to monitor that? And is that monitoring effort part of this Reauthorization Act?
The reauthorization would help us do that better because it does expand us beyond the gear. We're doing a number of different things. One, we're the chair of the Interagency Marine Debris Coordinating Committee, so we're working with the other feds. We put out with Department of Transportation a MARAD advisory to vessels in the area to report any debris coming in. We're working with our partners at the Fish and Wildlife Service at Midway to start monitoring and observing any debris coming in. We're working with our partners at the Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Monument to also do observations. We're enhancing our models by using satellite and trying to get into overflights to update our models so we can project and figure out where the debris is going to end up. But it's in the water, and it's eventually going to go somewhere. So I think the biggest thing we're doing right now is working with the state of Hawaii, other partners, as well as the other feds in developing an action plan, a response action plan.
The part of the testimony was that it's anticipated that it would hit this winter someplace in the northern Hawaiian Islands. Are you talking there about the monument, the Papahanaumokuakea area? Or is it like Marianas? Where are you referring to that?
It depends on what model you're talking about. There's a lot of different models that are out there, and the accuracy of those models have not been very well proven. We have models that are showing it's going to be that would be at the monument, basically, or at Midway. They said in 2 months, but now you'll see those are changing and saying it's going to get picked up into the gyre, just like you were saying. So I think what we want to do is, one, improve the accuracies of our models to help you understand what's happening, but in the end, really have a plan to prepare. If this ends up on our shores, what do we do with that and how do we address it?
Thank you. Dr. Gilman, I'm very familiar with Covanto on Hawaii, as you know, and we call it H-Power, which is I guess the way you're calling it, waste-to-energy facility.
Yes.
One of the interesting components of I guess it's your fish nets to energy or whatever you want to call that program. When you recover that, how much of that material goes into, for example, H-Power?
In that case, and it depends on the particular load that we get. If it appears to have lots of metals, it might go to our partner Schnitzer Steel first for them to recover as much of that as they can. Oftentimes they'll then shear the nets up further so we can, for the combustible portions of it, make steam, make power with it, and then return what metal is left for recycling. So it'll depend on the particular load that we get in. If there's very little metal in it, it'll come exclusively really to the energy recovery part of the system.
And one of the issues that I've dealt with your Covanto as well as our county representatives is whether the various kinds of regulations, whether it's called boiler MAC or utility MAC, is affecting your operation. Very quickly, do you anticipate that your operation is going to be affected by any of those regulations?
The boiler MAC and the utility MAC do not apply to that facility. There is a municipal waste combustor MAC that is a little further down the queue that would affect that facility. And we're watching that very closely to see how the precedents really of the boiler and utility MAC will affect the H-Power facility.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.